Fabulous with Vips and Vicky. The ThinqShift podcast for professionals who aspire to be fabulous leaders. Those who not only succeed, but also purposefully seek to reinvent the world.
Welcome to the Be Fabulous podcast, the 2021 series. We're back. Vicky and I are back, and we've actually planned for this series. And what are we going to do? We're going to do, I think, 13 episodes, maybe 14 episodes on fundamentally the fabulous person's guide to the future of work between now and 2025.
Vips, it makes us sound like we never plan.
Well, Well, I would suggest we put more planning into this round than we did in the last one.
You mean we just winged it?
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but I think, now we have, you've seen them, we get feedback from people who listen. And so now there's a duty of care and responsibility that's a little bit different from maybe how it was before. So
we started this as an experiment during COVID to give our listeners.
Well, this was like our virtual group hug, you and I, and now it's slowly turning into something.
It is, and some of this has been input from those of our listeners who are like, hey, we want your perspective on this. So you're going to hear a lot more of that. So for you listeners out there, if there are topics you want us to go into in a deeper way, let us know and we'll give you our perspective.
That's awesome. So basically, for everyone out there, what we're going to do today in today's podcast is we're really going to set up this, what I call the fabulous person's guide to the future of work. And we're going to set it up in terms of 6 key themes that we've identified, and 6 hot skill areas for 2025. So what we're going to do is we're going to take you through all of those today at a high level, and then each podcast that we do here on in will be a deep dive into each one of these areas. So Vicky, take us through what they are.
All right, I will. And when you think about deep dive, many of you have asked us to expand on our thinking levels. How do you go from tactical to operational to structured to systemic to meta? These are really hard concepts to really get. So in each episode, we're going to take one of these topics and look at it through the 5 thinking levels to make it real for you. And I know that's going to be so much fun for me and Vips to do, and hopefully you'll enjoy it as well. So the 6 themes. So the first one, which is very topical right now, is when we think about our post-COVID world, what is actually going to rebound? What is going to stick? What does it mean when we have a hybrid world of work in the office and remote? What's it all going to look like? World post-COVID. So that'll be our topic number 1. Topic number 2 is, well, we've been through a lot over the last year. What is the emotional Kevlar that we need in order to guarantee our success? So that might look like the mental health we need at work. How do you become bulletproof so that you don't get affected by the trauma of what's going on in the world? And how do you create this when it didn't exist generationally like this in the way things have before? So we'll be touching on topics like belonging, expectations of the workplace. We live in such a noisy world right now with so much disinformation and cancel culture. How do you become immune to that? Be still aware, but immune so it doesn't affect you. And how do you think about any beliefs that you might have that may be formed at a point in your life that you don't even know? How do you stop them from weighing you down? So emotional Kevlar is topic 2. Emotional 3 then becomes, how do we become adaptable and reskill, which has always been important, but right now it's going to matter more than ever. So we love to say, rest in peace, functional career paths. They're just not what's required anymore. There's going to be this new class system, really the intersection of so many domains, things like technology, marketing, business. How do you become skilled at all those things so you can be a real player in the hot skills of tomorrow? And then we're going to look at group unity. So as organizations, many of us weren't trained for having conversations to create group unity. And we're living in a world that is exacerbated by polarization. So how do we have conversations about unity, and why is it so important? Topic 5 is then going to cover socially conscious companies and why they're becoming mainstream. How are these big, hairy global issues being tackled, and what does that really look like? And then number 6 in this topic of themes is going to be about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Is that something that's really going to accelerate, or is there a risk of it fizzling out? So those are our themes, Vips.
Those themes sound so strong. We are going to do an hour on each of those. Why don't you tell us about the hot skills now as well then? So that's the first 6 will be on the themes, and then or topics, and then we're gonna do 6 on hot skills for you as fabulous people to be successful between now and 2025 that you might not have thought of. What are those ones, Vicky?
Vips, when I think about 2025, in one sense, I feel like it's a lifetime away. And then in the other sense, I feel like it's around the corner.
Yeah, that's not what I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to say, when I think of 2025, I think of retirement. That's what I thought. That's what I thought you were going to say.
Well, you only have to retire when you feel like you're working. And I don't work, Vips, because I love what I do. So...
Anyway, take us away. Tell us about those 6 as well.
All right, so when we think about 2025 and what we need to do to get there, the first is all about the new way of thinking critically and problem solving. And we're going to dive into why our brains are fundamentally lazy and there to keep us safe. And how do you drive yourself to think across these 5 different levels so that it becomes just a part of what you do. We'll also start to help you question why you believe what you believe. And that'll dive into our individual, our normative, and our societal belief forces. Why do we believe what we believe in the different ways, from how we think about society to our own individual beliefs. Skill number 2 is, in this new world, how do you, what we call, measure and manage the madness? 3 M's there. Are OKRs here to stay, or are they dead? What does that look like? How do you measure and manage the madness when the world's becoming very grey?
I think our clickbait headlining got a lot better, Vicky.
And then number 3, how do you build group unity in a way where it's taking center stage and it's not this afterthought? So this looks like embracing the grey, understanding trade-offs, staying away from those binary decisions, recognizing that there typically is no right or wrong, but rather a series of judgment calls and consequences, and being okay with those. Number 4 is, how do you get to build the skills to be what we're calling a proactive consigliere across all business areas? So you're not just the master of your domain, but you are called on by other business areas, and you proactively go into those areas as their consigliere. And Vips, that's from The Godfather, right?
Well, yes, it is from The Godfather. Yeah, I have visions of Duval in The Godfather playing that role for The Godfather. But the idea is more serious. It's really getting to the idea that just being really, really good at our domain is not enough. Mm-hmm. We have to be sufficiently competent in all the other domains that we touch. And we're going to touch more and more and more of them in the modern enterprise.
Good. 5 then becomes the topic of stewardship. So how do we start to take care of things that are required for multi-year challenges? Diversity, equity, and inclusion is one of them, but there are many others.
Climate is another one.
Climate is another one. Social justice. There's so many different elements in this. How do you create that when the world focuses on quarterly results and short-term wins, especially here in the US? And then number 6, how do you know that you're winning when you get a proactive pull beyond your functional area? Meaning, how are you recognized as somebody who can help all areas of the organization and the business rather than just your own domain? And people pull on you for your expertise with a different perspective that you might add to their area. Those feel like a good set, Vips. What do you think?
Those are pretty solid. And I suspect there's people out there trying to write these down right now as a list. Don't worry, they'll be in the show notes if you haven't seen them already. So what I think we should probably do, Vicky, for this episode is maybe just for each one of those, share our own views on why did we put them down? Like, why were they exciting enough for us to make this list, but feel like it would be worth sharing, not just with our listeners, but any fabulous person that's kind of on that journey to success in 2025. So I think that's what we should do, if you're up for that. I know that wasn't planned and prepared, but I think that's a nice way of doing it to stop us from actually going into the content of each one of those areas.
I know, because we could spend 5 hours right now.
I know we don't have 5 hours. We want to keep this. We want to keep this within the time frame that people expect to listen to a podcast. A nice walk is what we're trying to get to. So, okay, so let's do that. Let me tackle that first one. This post-COVID world. Why did we put that down, or why did you put that down?
So we are in such an interesting stage right now where some organizations are, heck no, people are going back into the office once this is done, can't wait to get back. It doesn't matter if you're in Los Angeles and you have hours and hours of commutes. We believe you need to be in the office where we can see you and you're doing the work. Then we've got the other extreme where organizations have got used to working remotely, working on Zoom and Teams and Meets. And they're like, why would we go back into the office? We've got these terrible commutes. There's all that drama that goes on in organizations when people are around each other. Why don't we create a world where we go in very deliberately for the perspective of belonging, but everything else we do remotely? And then there's going to be some kind of hybrid. And so what does this mean in terms of how we need to show up as we think about ourselves as individuals, no matter what organization we get into? I think it's a really important topic. What do you think, Vic?
Yeah, no, totally agree. And I think there's first order questions like that, but then you have like maybe slightly the more opaque, the hidden consequences. As things become more blended, the economics change. People have moved. Many people have changed states. People are living in different places. I can't tell you the number of people that I know that have just left New York. I'm just have no intention of going back. So when you look at that, it's going to change even, urbanization versus rural growth.
Yeah.
All in time for Elon Musk to make another God knows how many billion off Starlink, because suddenly there'll be Starlink popping up like everywhere in rural areas connecting the world. So this idea is actually quite profound. Not just in the US, but everywhere in the world. And then you say to yourself also things like, the things that people haven't really wrapped their heads around, particularly from a professional point of view, is it's kind of right now when everyone's on Zoom or Meet or whatever it is, it's kind of level playing field. The problem's going to be when 6 people are in the office and 2 people are on Zoom. And the dynamics of what then happens and people start feeling excluded, and then how that then shows up in performance evaluations, rewards, promotions, that kind of stuff. We haven't really wrapped our heads around that. And we got to be careful that by trying to do something, something that's being designed to make things more sort of fluid and desirable from an employee experience point of view, don't end up actually diminishing career prospects for fabulous people. So to me, it was, we can do it at, like with all of these, we can do it at the lowest tactical level, but there's a lot of headroom to go quite high on this one.
Okay, so that's topic 1. So let's talk about topic 2 then. Emotional Kevlar will become absolutely critical to success. Where does your head go with that one, Vips?
Yeah, I got to tell you, man, you had me at the title of this one, emotional Kevlar. When we came up with that, I think it came up almost like in, we were talking about it. That's what we need. We need emotional Kevlar. There's too many people out there right now who don't seem to have the Kevlar to be able to be resistant to these bullets that are firing at us from everywhere in the metaphorical sense. And so, yeah, this idea of emotional Kevlar, for me, it was, I talk about this concept of brain hijacking all the time. And I think where we're in now is, as we try to be more of ourselves and our best selves and more whole brain and more present and get in touch with our internal sense of well-being and so forth, the flip side of that is we also open ourselves to be emotionally hurt more. And when we think about it from a professional standpoint, the consequences of that can be, an absence of resilience. People finding it harder and harder to sort of spring back. And so the idea of emotional Kevlar was, how do you keep performance going, not just for yourself, but for your teams, while increasingly feeling like you're being either attacked or disappointed or having to experience a set of emotions that may be hurting you more than they would have 2, 3, 4 years from now. So that's kind of why I wanted to do it.
No, I love that. Yeah, and for me, it dovetails off that and it talks about this noisy world that we're in right now. So not only with the speed of information, but all the disinformation that's out there, the cancel culture, the polarization in the world, it's very, very noisy and it can feel overwhelming to so many people. So how do you stay abreast of what's going on so you're not informed, you stay informed, but you don't let it weigh you down so that you can be happy, be productive, be effective, while still in tune with the world, but not affected by the world? How do you be in the world, but not part of the world? And it's crazy.
Yeah, that's a nice way of saying it. So yeah, we think that, we've talked for years about the idea of emotional intelligence. I think emotional Kevlar is almost more important right now as an enabler to emotional intelligence in a way that maybe Daniel Goleman didn't think about it when he originally wrote his book, but no doubt is thinking about it now. So that's kind of where we want to dig into there. So we'll go to the third one. So adaptability and reskilling will matter more than ever, Vicky. Why?
So this one is really interesting, and we're seeing it today with organizations that are blending the way they work more and more. So you're starting to see organizations that are blending technology and marketing more and more. A lot of the tech budgets now sit in marketing. When you think about data, when you think about apps, it's very blurry where they all sit right now. So as executives and as individuals who think about organizational growth, thinking about it in a traditional domain way is not going to work in the future, because what's valued is people who can see the whole system and understand the different perspectives and understand the trade-offs between these different dynamics. And I think data is really going to exacerbate all of it, because it gives you another perspective on what's really going on, that you're able to see the facts of your situation in a completely different way that isn't as polarizing or as myopic as just looking through it through one lens. In the past, it was very easy to be, well, I'm in technology, I need the budget and resources for this platform because it's going to give us the ability to take over the world. And marketing will be like, well, that's all great, but actually we need to reach all these amazing people. So I want all the money to get out there and do that. Whereas now it's, hey, they're all important agendas, and how do we become skilled and versed at them so that we can have a rich discussion in different elements and not be focused in one area.
Yeah. I 100% agree with you. And what I would probably add to that is, I think I think we're on the cusp of a fundamental rethinking of what does it mean to have a career path? What does it even mean to have a career? The traditional idea is very much, you're following a path, and the idea of the path gives you some kind of security with regards to income potential, responsibilities, that kind of thing. And, in a world where your value, certainly if you're on leadership track, obviously that's our passion, is your value disproportionately comes from your ability to adapt and learn new things and apply them for economic value quickly, as opposed to how many years of whatever skill you have, or how many years of experience you have in your area. And that is going to be hugely destabilizing at an individual level, but from an organizational management point of level. And my view is that companies haven't really wrapped their heads around this and just kind of hoping that traditional career paths will be okay and it will work, and they will for anyone that isn't a fabulous person. It's probably the way I would describe it, and I think that's going to be the challenge. So that's kind of why we wanted to put it there.
Yeah, and those that are fabulous, you'll start to see the opportunities and the wealth potential grow exponentially.
That's right. We are seeing it now.
We're seeing it now.
We're seeing it now, and you can't find them. Then when you do find them, they earn gazillions, because you can't even very concretely articulate in data terms why. And that's what that theme is going to get at, and we're going to help you try to figure out how you not only understand it, but then how you show up to be able to take advantage of that if you're truly a fabulous person. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
I'm a bit worried about this whole fabulous person thing, Vicky, because we might only have like 10 listeners at the end of this, because it'd be like, I'm not fabulous enough. I'm sure there's more than 10.
Well, I hope they're on the journey like we all are. Which
We're,
is, hey,
we're
we
always
can,
on the journey.
we can all be fabulous. It just requires a lot of deep inner work.
So group unity.
This is a tough one, Vips, because this is what we've been experiencing so much of the last year. Even though we've been remote, even though we've been in a really unusual situation with the effects of COVID, where we've been isolated more than ever, we've had to start to create unity around topics that are really, really important. You know, whether it is the racial unrest, the social justice, the different themes that are coming out that have always been there, but have been amplified over the last year. And group unity, when we think about that post-COVID world, what does that look like for an organization as we think about belonging? And how do you create that when you have hybrids of people in the office and people outside of the office? How do you have that when you've got very different views politically, from a interest perspective and everything else? The traditional ways of gathering, you know, the little happy hours and coffees here and there, just aren't cutting it, Vips. You know, they're not bad, but they don't go far enough to create belonging and a sense of who am I and why am I here, versus it being a transactional situation. And that's just at the organizational level. Now we think across the world, the level of group unity that's required, that's a whole nother topic.
Sure. Well, last year you had, you had family. Well, the year before you had families that couldn't get together for Thanksgiving because of political differences, and so I mean you've got at that level as well as at the company level. So this idea of group unity, I think it's so powerful because, and I think the more this idea that, but we weren't even trained for it. Is it even appropriate? Why should I have to do this? I'm at work to do my job, to create value, earn money. Why do I have to do all this stuff? Well, it's really because generationally, the expectations of a new generation are so much higher in terms of our contribution to social, economic, and political issues. As leaders, it's almost like as business leaders, we had it easy over the last 30 years, but now it's really, it's hard, and it's going to get harder because the problems that we face as a society are going to get worse, not better. I mean, they're harder problems to solve. They will get better over time as we resolve them, but they when we talk about environment, we talk about recycling, we talk about climate, we talk about poverty, we talk about social justice. These are complex, multi-generational, hardcore problems that from a business point of view, it's no longer really acceptable to not being good stewards of those causes in some way, shape, or form, whichever ones you choose to make. And that's really where I think this group unity comes from, because I think it will ultimately turn into a problem with talent, being able to keep talent. The best talent will expect their organizations to take a stand.
Yeah. And that one's going to be a hard one for us to move from meta all the way down to tactics, because we want to stay in meta for that conversation.
That one's tough. That was tough.
All right. So socially conscious companies will become mainstream. What's that one going to be about, Vips?
So the reason why I put that there was it really dovetails from the previous one, but it's really the idea that it's becoming increasingly unacceptable to not have some level of purposefulness, social conscious, a reason why we're here above and beyond making money. Those things, whatever you want to call them, triple bottom line. There's so many initiatives and ideas out there, and so many companies. I think of companies like Warby Parker, who have baked in the idea that every time you help us, we help someone else. We have that at ThinqShift. Every time we help us, we help someone else. Those are becoming mainstream primarily because, again, top talent and fabulous talent is not going to accept otherwise. So, for fabulous organizations that are really going to be, the engines really for a better world, ultimately, they won't resign these issues to just corporate social responsibility They will be taken more seriously at a mission level, if you will. And that's more than just marketing. I think what's going to happen is you're going to start seeing real teeth given to that in terms of shareholder governance, in terms of economic commitment, financial commitment, and strategic commitment over a long time frame. So that should be fun. And I think many leaders don't want that, right? Because it's hard. It's hard enough. It's hard enough to have a good business that makes money and, keeps my employees happy and everything else. And now you're just putting a whole bunch of extra stuff on me. Yeah. That's what it means.
And stuff that's not easy to define either or measure.
Yeah, correct. So that's why that one's there.
All right. So our sixth theme, DEI accelerate or fizzle out.
Another super tough one. Why don't you go for this one first?
I'll do that. Yeah, so certainly here in the US, after the unrest in the summer of 2020, there was a lot of interest in accelerating the diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda. And we at ThinqShift received so many inquiries and requests to support organizations through this journey. And it started with, hey, we're very interested in more than training around unconscious bias, more than getting involved in recruitment and looking at who we hire and are we hiring in an appropriate way. We really want to set the foundation for living and breathing this in a way that we are managing it, we are creating belonging around it. It's just what we are, so that it's no longer a conversation. When we're no longer talking about DEI, we know that it's part of who we are. It's part of our DNA. And we've already started to see that the energy around it, when it comes to hard dollars, touching on the previous conversation around socially conscious companies, we're already seeing that the commitment to actually put hard dollars beyond training and recruitment, it's just not there in many organizations. The will is not there. It's too hard. It's one of those, it's going to take many, many years. It's too fuzzy. Don't know if I want to go there. So we thought this would be a really great one to unpack in a lot more detail.
And a highly emotional one for all of us. I mean, and it's this one I think will be really, really interesting because, I mean, obviously from my perspective, the answer is not to allow it to decelerate. But I think it's also the challenge when so many organizations have embraced DEI through the lens of perception management. Rather than full-blooded commitment from a leadership will point of view. And I think that's where it's easy to create motivation. It's hard to maintain stamina, particularly when you're talking about things that are really hard and going to take a long, long time to do. And so that's really what we want to try to draw out from this one is how do you create long-term stamina for this sort of initiative so it doesn't become, a footnote. It's, or a chapter in, it was that period where this was really important, but then it stopped being so important and something else became really important. And that cycle is what we want to really explore. And we're using DEI as a lens to do that through, quite frankly, because it's been so, it's so real for us at the moment,
so
particularly
needed.
in the States.
Yeah, so needed.
So those are heavy themes. There's people out there thinking, wow, these guys did prepare this time round. Yeah.
I love that. So those 6 themes we'll be looking at through the 5 different thinking levels. So for those of you that want to understand what it means to be more strategic and get out of the day-to-day and the weeds and raise yourself up through those 5 thinking levels, we'll use these 6 themes as a way of discussing each of those different areas.
Here's my prediction, Vicky. As we do that, there'll be so many people who listen is like, oh God, I thought I was being strategic, but I'm really very tactical. They're gonna, there's some, as I was thinking through them, I was like, oh yeah, gosh, I haven't been particularly strategic on that one either. I think there's gonna be a lot of that kind of moments when we do those segments.
I think you're right. It's too easy to be down a few levels, Vips. Up there, it's tough.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So let's cover off the 6 hot skills for 2025 as well. So what we the idea behind these again is more things you have to get much better at doing, as opposed to what's the environment going to be doing around you, which is going to mean that you're going to have to do things. So I'll ask you the first one. So the first one we put up there was, we have to look at critical thinking and problem solving in a different way. Why? Surely critical thinking is just critical thinking, Vicky.
Well, if you think about critical thinking and problem solving, it's been on the core skill list for, I don't know, as long as I can remember, Vips, 10, 15, 20 years. You've always seen critical thinking and problem solving as one of those key areas we need to get good at. What we are saying, though, is we've got to think about it completely differently, because our world has got so much more complicated. So it's not only at the tactical level, it's not only for what's in front of you, but it's looking at it through that longer term perspective. It's looking at it from the perspective of different communities and different groups. So you can think about at different levels, what problem are we solving? So is it the world's problem? Is it society's problem? Is it the company's problem? Is it the team's problem? Is it my family's problem? Is it my problem? And being able to critically think your way through all those things and see both perspectives. So
Both?
I think
All 10.
all 10. I think in the past we might have been able to see our perspective all the way through those things and get to meta. But the challenge I foresee in this one, Vips, is that to be able to see everybody else's perspectives and talk it through the 5 levels to get to the point where we understand it and can understand all that data from their perspectives. That is going to be the challenge. But if we don't do that, then we're going to be in this crazy place where we are right now and never get out of it, because it's too easy to stay in our own views and not be willing to go into somebody else's views. I mean, social media and the depending on the news channels you watch, you have a completely different view. I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, and they had a completely different view of the racial unrest that happened last year. And to me, I thought that was pretty black and white, to be honest, but it's not.
I see how you did that.
Little pun there, but it's not, Vips. It was quite, I listened from this perspective of, let me truly understand, why do they believe what they believe and why they're seeing it the way they're seeing it. And it's hard not to get emotional when these topics come up, because
and it's also that I think there's something about when that one, what we're calling the new critical thinking and problem solving patterns, and you see them through the lens of the themes that we described earlier, particularly emotional Kevlar, and what a post-COVID world looks like. It takes on a whole different level of importance in terms of your ability to be able to navigate if you are not just going to be successful, but also lead and manage others. And so it's if you pardon the expression, it's a shift up time. I mean, it really is not going to be. We're not going to be able to get away with what we've been doing now. It's going to be an up level for the leaders of the future.
All right. So you talked to us then about the second one, what we love to call the 3 M's.
3 M's.
Measuring and managing the madness.
Yeah. This one was, this is probably the one that really emerged from one of our listeners. And
he knows who he is.
And he knows who he is. A quick shout out to Brian if you're listening. But the idea is actually, it's one of those things that sounds so easy. We set goals, we identify measures and KPIs and accountabilities, and we do those. And if we do them well, the world will be a wonderful place, and our problems will be solved, and we'll all make tons of money, and the business will be successful. Except it doesn't. Yeah, except it's one of these things that's so seductive on paper and just doesn't work in that way. And so, where we kind of got to with this was we want to take a sort of a deep dive almost into whatever you call it. OKRs is the language that I think originated from Google, but whether it's goal setting, whether it's KPIs. Development objective. I mean, there's so many different languages we've had or semantics we've had around this basic idea. But what I'm also trying to get to is, the whole, you can measure things forever and you can manage things forever. At some point you also have to do. And so how do you develop the right skills as a leader and an executive to not get lost kind of to not get lost in the science of measuring and aligning and managing all this stuff, and actually making sure the results and the outcomes are actually occurring. And more importantly, you're not getting the side effects from the very results that you were after that actually ended up giving you the wrong outcomes.
All those good unintended consequences.
Those unintended consequences,
Yeah.
it's and that's really where we want to get to, because I think sometimes these things become industries in themselves, and they end up not serving their organizations or the people in the way they were designed, and actually end up creating more stress, more anxiety, and lower performance and lower productivity. And that's the area we want to tackle. But I just a quick sort of punchline here. We are not going to be suggesting that you don't have accountability and you don't have goals. We don't think that's the right answer either.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's looking at it from a wider perspective. So as we talked about those themes, especially those hard ones around group unity and socially conscious companies and organizations, and DEI and post-COVID world and the emotional Kevlar. I mean, there's some tough stuff there that doesn't lend itself to goals in a very practical way. There's certainly things you can do with goals in those different areas to make sure you're making progress, but it really is a way of being. It's not really a way of doing. Now, you can do things to get to the way of being, but you've got to embrace the being of it. And when you focused overly on measuring and managing, you kind of forget that we are, I love to say that we're human beings, we're not human doings. And we don't just get the value from all this doing. We can get there and be hugely successful, but if we don't have a good sense of our being and our happiness, the rest doesn't really matter. And so that's going to be a pretty meta conversation when we touch on that side of it, but I think it's going to be valuable.
Yeah. All right, take us to the next one then. Building group unity takes center stage, Vicky. Why does building group unity take center stage?
Well, if we think again about the themes that we've touched on, the skills that you would have learnt in your mastering of your craft, and even managing and even leading teams, are not necessarily the same skills that are going to be needed to create group unity. So this becomes a lot more grey. This becomes a lot more of being willing to understand the differences of perspective, and being open to the different points of view and seeing the bigger goal of what you're trying to do to create whatever your agenda is, whether it is socially conscious, whether it is about climate change, whatever you decide your agenda is. How do you create that belonging and that bigger sense of why you're there doing what you are, that people believe in and want to follow? And that's not a skill most people have ever learned, Phipps. It's hard enough having a one-to-one relationship with somebody. It's hard enough to have a great one-on-one conversation with somebody. Creating group unity when you have multiple people thinking different things, oh my gosh, that's a whole nother skill set that we're going to have to get into in a deep way.
Yeah, Vicky, this one, I was actually talking to a coaching client of mine about this after we created this list. And as I was trying to explain it, his eyes glazed a little bit. Why do I have to, he was having a hard time sort of understanding what I was getting at. And then in the end, quite spontaneously, I said, look, do you understand that with this level of complexity and challenges that we're going to have in the world going forward, that all professional leaders who are going to be successful in the future are going to almost have to become like business environment professional diplomats and negotiators? And as soon as I said that, he was like, oh God, yes, that's exactly how I feel half the time. And it just, we don't think of that. We don't think of diplomacy and diplomatic negotiations as something you do in a company. I mean, we think of, price negotiation, and we think of lobbying, and but we don't think of it that way. And I think what it's really saying here again is it's a skill set that typically is not cultivated as part of that normal career path earlier on. And how do we find ways to how do you find ways to build that muscle, as you scale, because you're going to need it. You're going to need it a lot more now than you would have 20 years ago.
I'm just thinking about all the organizations that I've touched in my 25 years plus doing this kind of work. And I just feel so happy as I think about if those leaders could create group unity in the way we're talking about it. What an amazing organization they would have, rather than the silos and the unintended fighting that tends to happen as people focus in on their own little domains and groups. So the next one, Vips, being our godfather, the proactive consigliere for all business areas.
All right. So the basic idea is here that we think it's going to be a really important skill for all people on that journey to being a fabulous leader, to turn themselves into good advisors. And I mean, I don't mean advisors in the consulting sense or in the, in the Bain, McKinsey, Accenture sense, or even in the ThinqShift sense. I just mean that it's going to become a core competency of more levels of leadership to be able to be sought for your advice on how to handle complexity, while recognizing that and welcoming the idea of being stress tested, welcoming the idea of being challenged, welcoming the idea that from the dialogue and the discussion and the challenge and the food fight across the room will emerge a better answer that's ultimately better for our company. It's better for us as individuals, and we can agree, we can disagree, but we work it out. And that's what I mean by this idea of not just engaging when someone comes to you asking for advice, but know how to do that proactively to help someone not hit a pitfall, to help someone maybe do something better than they would have done otherwise, or work with a partner in a way that's different from the way they would have thought of it before. So this kind of idea of seeing oneself as a consigliere, an advisor, a coach, someone who's invested in the other person's success, I think is going to start becoming more and more of a core business leadership competency, even down to sort of director levels. And I think that right now that exists at the very top of organizations, but it doesn't really exist as you go a couple of levels down.
It's interesting. I've been working with the leadership team over the last couple of days, and the theme we had for them was family. What does it mean to operate as a leadership team as a family? And I mean, take consigliere, Vips. I mean, that's all about the family.
Well, the godfather was the family.
So for those of you that were part of my team this week and know what I'm talking about, think of the godfather. This is your role of looking to
minus all the crime and the drugs and the prostitution and everything else. And the shooting and the killing.
You don't kill each other if you don't like each other.
All right. So take us to the next one, Vicky. Stewardship for multi-year challenges.
So with those themes that we touched on, none of them are easy. None of them are 90 days, quarterly focus, and we're done. They all have these generational, multi-year, even multi-decade themes to them. So what skill do you need to be a steward of that? What belief system do you need to be a steward of that, so you don't give up the will halfway through and want to just die? Because you're having a fight. You're having a fight with a system that's focused on short-term results, focused on efficiency. So how do you get a bigger sense of purpose? And what's your willingness to fight? And what are the things you'll die on a hill for? And what are the things you won't?
Yeah, and how do you continue to push the boundaries on that without putting yourself in a place where you're no longer able to fight for those things? And that's the skill. That's the core skill. It's, if you're passionate about anything, whether it's race, whether it's climate, whether it's gender, whether it's pick one, pick whatever topic you want. These things are stewardship over decades. While we absolutely need, in my opinion, to make progress against all of these and push the boundaries on all of these, there's no point if you break the system to the point that no one's going to listen to you and work with you anyway. In which case it's kind of like an own goal. And I think there's stewardship implies kind of the skill of how do I move things forward as fast as the environment around me can sustain and be uncomfortable by, but without blowing up. And that's the way I like to think of it.
Well, you have that perfect edge where you are scared and excited, right? That's it. And it's risky.
And it's risky, which is why generally so many non-fabulous leaders will just avoid it altogether.
It's too hard, it's too risky to play to win.
Who are you thinking about now, Vicky? I'm just curious.
Many, but it'd be so easy for them to switch to being fabulous if they would just lean in and take those risks. All right, you take us away with the last one. The proactive pull beyond the functional area.
Yeah, so this is really, this is almost more like a measure of success. Yeah. How much do you experience yourself being pulled for your help, for your input, for your guidance, for your advice beyond your area of expertise? So you're in IT, you're a CIO. How much do you really get pulled into financial conversations that got nothing to do with IT? How much do you really get pulled into legal conversations that got nothing to do with IT? How much do you get pulled into mergers and acquisitions conversations that got nothing to do with the technology due diligence, for example? Or if you're in finance, how much you get pulled into conversations about marketing? So this idea that fabulous people and fabulous leaders will, if you are truly operating from a place that's more balanced between your content power, positional power, and personal power, then you will know that by how much proactive pull you're getting beyond your functional area. And this is one of those ones where when we do this one, there'll be a little tool that goes with it. And there's probably going to be a lot of people looking down, feeling guilty that I'm guilty of this. I don't do enough. I'm not, I think I'm wonderful and I'm doing a great job. But at the end of the day, no one's really coming to me for my advice on anything other than what they're expecting me to do. And I would suggest that that's not good training to be a fabulous leader of the future. It might make you a mediocre executive, but it's not going to make you a fabulous leader.
Okay, so we covered there a good overview, I would say, of the 6 themes and the 6 hot skill areas. So what were they? The 6 themes, post-COVID world, what does that look like? Second one, emotional Kevlar, what does that look like for 2025? How do we adapt and reskill, and what does it mean to have a career in 2025? Group unity, how do we have conversations we weren't trained for? What does it mean to be a socially conscious organization, and how does it become mainstream? And DEI, does it accelerate or fizzle out? Vips, what were the 6 skills we touched on as we wrap up?
Yeah, so skill number 1, what we've called the new critical thinking and problem solving techniques that are essential for fabulous people. Second one, how to measure and manage the madness. That's really hard. That's really hard to say. How to measure, manage the madness. Measuring it, whatever. You get the idea. That's the one on goals and objectives. The third one, as a leader, building group unity to take center stage and using it to drive results. Fourth one, how to be a proactive consigliere for all businesses, minus all the sort of criminal connotations that brings up from the Godfather movie. Number 5, stewardship for multi-year challenges. How do you take on big multi-year, multi-decade type issues and take the baton forward in a way that's going to be optimal? And last but not least, how you measure yourself in terms of proactive pull beyond your functional area and seeing that as a measure of success.
So Vips, we have a wonderful series coming up. I am pretty excited. I think each topic is fascinating. No doubt we are going to be looking at it through all the different lenses as we think about tactically all the way to meta for each of these themes. I'm excited. I hope you all are too. So we wish you a wonderful week and be fabulous.
Be fabulous, everyone.